Welcome back. In this part 2 of the lecture, we're going to be looking at placing Photoshop files and PDFs. So if this is the first lecture you're watching, please go back to our playlist and make sure you watch part 1 that goes over how to create a new file, how to set up your workspace, how to add and remove pages, what facing pages means, how to zoom in and out, and how to create frames. So we covered a lot in part 1, and now we're going to get going in part 2. So for part 2, what I'm going to do is it's going to start out really similar to part 1, where I create 2 frames on these spreads, and I'm going to be pulling in Photoshop files rather than JPEGs. So the shortcut for frame is F, and again there's 2 ways of doing it. I can click and tell it what size I want. So this time I'm going to go back to the 6x6 and then OK, or I can click and drag. So either way works, and remember, as long as you stay in frame, every time you click on your screen, InDesign is going to think you want to draw a new frame. So to get out of this, I'm going to hit Escape, and then I can hit V to go back to my selection tool. So let me go ahead and place this 6x6, and again our smart guides let us know when we are lined up on the page. So there's my center point, and then with this one on the right that I drew freehand, I can go to my Properties menu. Remember, if this isn't set up, please watch part 1 of the lecture so you can see the properties. And this shows me my width and height, and the easiest way of doing it is just by simply clicking in here and doing 6, tab, 6, enter, and I've got my 6x6. I'll go ahead and place this one too so it's centered. And then what I'm going to do is we are going to place our PSD files in these frames. Now to select a frame, I click on it and you can see that it's selected because these toggle points on the corners and midpoints highlight. So when I click off of it, you can see it's not selected, but I want to click on it so I can see that it's selected. And what I'm going to do now is hit Control or Command D to place it. Remember, duh. And the file that I'm looking for now is the PSD, so VilaSavoy.psd. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on Show Import Options. So make sure that Show Import Options pops up, and then Open. And now, instead of just placing the image, it's giving us some options. So if you see here, it's actually showing us our layers that exist in Photoshop. So if I turn off SLCC, it'll bring it in without SLCC, or I can remove the background as well. So for this example, I want to turn off SLCC, and then when updating the link, let's keep the layer visibility overrides. And then I'll click OK, and there's my file. So it pulled it in without the SLCC. Now let's talk about the fitting one more time. This will be another review. So you can see I've got my frame kind of hanging off the edges. And if I wanted to check to see how the picture actually fits, I bring my cursor to the center of the image. There's the hand that pops up. Give it a little high five by clicking on it. And now you can see the image in the frame is selected. So you can see it doesn't fit perfectly. So what we want to do is go over to our properties, and these properties automatically update depending on what you've selected on. So for example, I'm going to click off of this and see how that went away, right? If I click on it again, it'll pull up my image properties. It's kind of nice. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and fit my content proportionately. So I'm going to shrink it down so it fits in this frame. Okay, so it's not hanging off any of the sides, but what's awkward is I have a frame that's too big and I want the frame to fit to my content. So what I'll do now is click on Fit Frame to Content, and it snugs it in nice and tight. Okay, so that's how we can get our Photoshop file. Now, I know I had you guys create another frame here. That was just for practice, What I'd actually like you guys to do is to delete it. And what we're going to do instead is we are going to make a copy of this frame. So before I show you, I want you to just think for a second, and if you need to, pause after I ask the question. But if you were in Photoshop, how do you duplicate an object or a layer? What key do you hit? Do you remember? Okay. Hopefully you remembered that once you have something selected, so I've clicked on this frame, if I hold the Alt key, do you see what's happening to my screen? There is that double icon of my cursor, which means it's duplicating it. And now if I drag over to the right or wherever I want to go, it's going to make a copy of this image, and I can keep duplicating it as many times as I want as long as I keep hitting the Alt button. I'm hitting Control Z or Command Z to get rid of that. So now I've got this original file and I've got this copy of it right here. So one thing that's really nice is if you pull in a Photoshop file and you decide that, on one of them you don't want the text, but on the other one you do, what you can do is right-click on this, and you should be able to go to, I think it's called image layers. Yep, object layer options. Sorry, I was close, but not quite. So if it's a Photoshop file, you'll see this. So if I pull this up, now you can see that it's showing me my layers again, and turn on preview so you can see how it's affecting it. And I can turn on the SLCC file or turn it back off. Okay, let's go ahead and keep it on. So okay. And again, I got there by clicking on the file, right-clicking, and going down to Object Layer Options. I wish there was a better shortcut for this, but we'll take what we can get. So I've got two of the exact same image linked in my file, and one of them has the SLCC layer and one of them doesn't. So before we go too much further, I wanted to also mention the preview that we're working in right now. On your keyboard, go ahead and hit the W key for me, and then click it again. And can you see what's happening to our screen? Okay, so W stands for working mode. So in working mode, we see all of the non-printing objects, and that includes these margins right here. Those are non-printing objects, as well as the blue frames around our object frames. So again, if I hit W, all of those non-printing objects go away, and this is essentially a print preview. So keep that in mind as you work, and go ahead and toggle to W back and forth once in a while. We're going to go ahead and do one other really cool thing that we can do in InDesign. And this is one of the things that makes InDesign really powerful. So bear with me for just one moment, but I'm going to compare it to InDesign. So, sorry, not InDesign, in Microsoft Word. So whenever we pull in an image into InDesign, it actually links back out to the main file that we pulled in, which is this PSD right here. So if this PSD changes, all of the PSDs in the file also update. So for example, if you were working in Microsoft Word on a portfolio or a project where there was a logo, and you had that logo on 50 pages, if you had to update the logo, you changed the graphic design, maybe your business has a partner now, so you need to put their name on it too. That's a lot of pages to have to go through and update. But the thing that's great about InDesign is that you can go through and update one of those, and it'll automatically update all of them. So we are going to do one more duplication, and then we're going to edit our PSD file to show you how that works. So I just showed you that if you click on an image and hold Alt, you can make a copy of the image. What I'd like you to do next is I want you to learn how to copy your pages or your spreads down here. So hello, I've moved down here right now. So the way that you duplicate both of these pages at once, again, it's really similar to Photoshop. You want to make sure you have both pages selected. And if you remember from part 1 of the lecture, to grab more than one page, you hold the Shift key down. So click on one, hold the Shift key, click on the other. Once they're both selected, drag them down to the plus sign as if you were adding pages, and it duplicates them for you. So there they are. And they're slightly out of order, so what I can do is click on page 6, which is a blank page, and just drag it down here, and it reorders my pages for me. So if you need to, go ahead and pause, and what I'd like you to do is duplicate the original 2 spreads that we had with the 2 Photoshop files in them. Duplicate those and reorder your pages so they look like this. And then go ahead and come back and we'll go ahead and edit our PSD file. All right, so here is another powerful tool in InDesign, and that is being able to update files and link Photoshop files. So I'm going to go down to page 7 where I have the SLCC logo right here. And what I want to do is I can right click on it and I can go down to Edit Original or Edit With. Usually it's really smart, and when I click on Edit Original, it knows to open up Photoshop. So you can't see it on my screen, but it automatically launched Photoshop, and it's going to open it up. Now sometimes, depending on your computer settings, it might not automatically open in Photoshop. It might go to like Preview or a different program. If that's the case, let me hop back into InDesign. You can always go to Edit With and then pick the program from here or grab another one. But like I said, like 99% of the time it gets it right for me. But just in case it doesn't, instead of doing Edit Original, go to Edit With and tell it what program you want. So go ahead and get this open in Photoshop. So pause if you need to. And here's our file that we're working with, the PSD file. And what I'd like to do once you guys get in here is first create a new layer. Okay, so I've got a new layer and I'm just going to call this Test. And in here, go ahead and just go to your brush tool. Okay, I'm going to make mine a little smaller, and it doesn't matter what color, but go ahead and just draw some stuff. Okay. You can also grab the SLCC logo, and I'm going to move it down here. Okay. And then once you've made those changes, you need to save it or close out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of it, and it'll ask me if I want to save. So I'm going to hit Save. Okay. Now let's see what's happened in InDesign. Take a look at this. So every file that linked to that one PSD has now been updated. So the files where I had the SLCC on and linked, they have moved. And then each one of them gets this new layer. So again, really powerful tool. Now we don't necessarily want this new layer on each one. So do you guys remember how to edit that? So I can turn it off here. I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. Press pause if you want. Here's a hint, it's a right click. And you want to go down to Object Layer Options. Here's Test. I can turn that off, and it turns it off here. I haven't tried this before, but let me see if I can do the object layer properties for more than one. Nope, only one at a time. So I'm going to turn it off here. Oops. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it on these two on the side. So again, really powerful tool. So imagine your projects. You can turn off text that you may have added. Let's say you have a file that has a few objects in it. You can isolate it to one object as well, which makes it really nice. So that's how you would work with a PSD file. So I would say at this point, if you have any questions, I'd want you to re-watch this portion of the lecture and redo it one more time. And then on Thursday when I have open WebEx time, or on Tuesday when I have open WebEx time, go ahead and reach out to me with any questions that you might have. what we'll be doing next is going over how to insert a PDF. So for this, I'm going to add another spread. So I have my 2-page spread again. And if you haven't already, which I'm sure you have, make sure that you've downloaded the PDF that was also in our class files. So for this one, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Now, up until this point, I have always created a frame and pulled the image into it. This time, I'm going to do it different. I'm going to simply place the object without a frame to show you what happens. So I'm going to hit Control D, and here's my PDF, and I'm just going to do it kind of default to show you what happens. Oops. You guys won't see this yet, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it like that. This is what you guys will see when you hit Control D. Your cursor will have a little preview of the interior elevations, and it's waiting for you to place it. So as soon as you click, here's my file. And see how big it is, how big the frame is? If you just place an image without a frame, by default it places it in at full size, which is quite large. So any PDF and even JPEGs, like images that you get off of your phone, will come in quite large. So that's why I always like to place my frame first. So I'm going to click on this and delete it. I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to go ahead and just freehand a frame that I think will fit it. And once I have my frame, we're going to do a couple things different. So first, draw your frame, just freehand it, and then hit Control D, and I need you guys to make sure that Show Import Options stays on. It might already be on because we turned it on for the PSD, but I'm not sure if it keeps it on for the PDF. And the reason why we want to keep the Show Import Options on is if you don't have this on, by default it'll only bring in page 1, but a PDF is typically multiple pages. So from here you can see that there are 5 pages to this PDF, and you can grab the one that you want to pull in. So let's say I want this interior elevation on page 4. Okay. The other option that I also need to think about is whether you or not you want a transparent background or you want this to come in white. Now, to be completely honest, I don't think I've ever brought it in with the transparent background, because if you have PDFs on top of each other, it's like a wireframe. It's going to get a little bit messy. So I typically keep that off. But if you do want to stack PDFs on top of each other, by making them transparent, you can and still see them underneath. So please keep that in mind too. So again, I've done page 4, and I'm cropping it to the media, and I'm not turning on the transparent background. And then I'll click on OK. And I'm going to hit V to go back to my selection tool. And you can see here, if I click on it, this image is so large. Look at how far I have to zoom out before I can see a preview of it. That's how large the PDF is. Now, hopefully you remember how to size these in the frame. Your frame fitting comes up automatically. And again, I want to go to Fit Content Proportionately. And then after that, I want to fit frame to content. And that's how it ends up on my screen. Okay, you can choose to scale it up or down from here if you'd like. Like for instance, if you want to go from margin to margin, here's what's kind of frustrating. If you just pull this, do you see that it just made the frame bigger, but it didn't change the size of the image? So again, if you just pull on one of those, that doesn't work. What you have to do is hold Alt and Shift at the same time. I don't think that worked either. Sorry, let me do that one more time. Let me find the right key combination. Sorry, it's Shift and Control. That changes it for you. So Shift and Control allows you to rescale your object. All right, put that margin to margin. So remember, at any point, if you need to pause, please do, and then rewind, and then come back and follow along with me. What I'd like to do next is copy this frame over to this side of the page and bring in page 5. So I'm going to grab this, and remember, Alt duplicates it. Okay. And now I can replace this image by hitting Control D. There's my PDF. I still have show import options on. And then this time I'm going to go to page 5. And the thing that's nice is because I copied it over, it remembered everything that I had programmed into it. So it knew to fit. It already, it just copied all the attributes that I had on this side. What I'd like to do on this side though, and this is really common, is if you ever wanted to show your work, look, we're only at 23%, so we can make this a lot bigger. You can take your image, and notice that I'm working with the direct selection tool, so I gave it a high 5, and I actually want to zoom in to this washer and dryer. And I'm going to come up here and make this like 75% or whatever percentage you want. Now I just have to find where it went. There we go. And then once I get the washer and dryer into view, I click off of it, and now I can come back and adjust my frame to fit around the washer and dryer. So lots of edits with the frames and the direct selection tool. So there's the direct selection. You can see where the image actually is, and then when I click off of it, it goes back to the frame. Okay. In part 1, I talked about the different display performances. So you can see that this might look a little bit pixelated. If I right click, I'm going to see what my display performance is at. It is at high quality display, but I think right now my graphic card is just having a little bit of a hard time because I've got so much on my screen. But you can see once I get up to 200%, that is clear. So do some tests once in a while to make sure that your graphic quality looks good. Again, good rule of thumb, make sure everything is at 100% or smaller. If you need to cheat a little bit, don't go bigger than 105 or 110%. Okay. The last thing that I wanted to point out that we haven't talked about yet is where these files get saved and how. And when I say files, I actually mean the images inside InDesign. So I just showed you how you can link the files and how it automatically updates, and that includes your PDFs and your PSDs. So right now, my PDF lives in this folder here. So everything that InDesign is linking is in this folder. What I'd like you to do is go to your window and make sure Links is on. Okay. So my Links is on. I'm going to actually just pull it out so you can see it. And this shows you a preview of every file linked in my project. And it's important to have this menu as well because in case you lose a link, this menu is going to warn you. So what I mean by that, let's pretend this is my Downloads folder. And for whatever reason, I moved this from my Downloads folder somewhere else. So see how I pulled that out of here and I dragged it back here? When I come back here, you'll see that InDesign automatically, question marks, this preview is now horrible. And because my Links menu is open, you can also see it has a question mark here. So every place that I've linked it is missing. Now this is saying missing, double click to relink. So if I double click on it, it can't figure out where it is. It's asking you to go find it. So what I need to do now is go to Images for InDesign. And I think I backed it up once. And once I find this one, remember they're all the same link, it'll relink all of them. I think I did this one incorrectly. I did the wrong page. Whoops. So let me undo that. Sorry. Sometimes it's hard to talk and work at the same time. So with this one, I'll double click it to relink. There it is right here. Open. And then With this, it's asking me what page. It should still be page 4. Yep, so search this relink directory, found one, and relinked the other one. So it knew where to grab both of them. Okay, so watch out for those relinks. It also works for the PSD files. So for example, if I go back into that folder, even if I rename this, like if I double click on this and I rename it Photoshop example, InDesign is going to be really sad. So if I come here, see how it's like, where did that file go? It doesn't know to look for Photoshop example. So this one file is linked in here 4 times and it can't find any of them because the name changed. Let me zoom out a little bit. But what I can do now is if I double click on one of them, let me go to Images for InDesign, remind it that, okay, this is the new name, and then click on Open. Keep visibility overrides. Let's see if it remembers those. And then this one is relinked, but it wasn't smart enough to know to do the others. So let me actually try it from the main file. When I did it this time, I did it from this particular image. I'm going to do it from my link menu to see if it knows to do it for all of them now. So I'm doing the same thing. I double clicked on that question mark, Photoshop example, open. Okay. I think it's asking me for each image. So it pulls it back in, but I have to go back and change my layer options. Okay, so with InDesign files, you have to be really diligent about saving them all in the same location and make sure that you don't move them or rename them after you start working. And if you do, just know where to find the links folder so you can go ahead and update them as well. Okay, once you have your work done, okay, remember I mentioned in the first lecture that you wouldn't ever send me an InDesign file, and hopefully you see why now, because I won't have your links. So when I open it, it'll all just be broken links because I don't have the files on my computer. Next week I'm going to show you how you can package it so you can share an InDesign file, but for now I'm going to show you how to export it as a PDF. So that's the big thing. We're not printing as a PDF or saving as a PDF, we are exporting. The last thing I'm going to show you for today is if you go up to File, please go down to Export, or the shortcut that I always use is Command E or Control E. We're going to do this 2 different ways. So first it's asking you, what do you want the name to be? And I do want it to be InDesign Exercise. And make sure you're putting it in the same folder that you're working in. This is where I'm working. And down at the bottom, there's lots of formats. So for our class, we'll be doing JPEG or PDF print. Those are the 2 that we'll be working with. And a JPEG is just one single image. So that won't work for today because we have several pages. So we want to do a PDF print. And then we're going to hit Save. And it's going to ask me a couple questions. So remember, we're going to do this 2 ways. So in this menu, first I want to make sure I get all pages, not just page 1. And first I'm going to export as pages. And then the other thing I want you to check is under compression, just make sure your image quality is set to maximum. By default it should be, but there was an InDesign update 2 years ago that set everything to minimum, so our PDFs looked pretty terrible. So after that I always want to check. Go ahead and click on Export, and it automatically should open up in Acrobat or a PDF viewer so you can see what you've exported. So I just went through each page. So this is what it looks like when you export as pages. Now hopping back into InDesign, you can also export as spreads. So I'm going to do that same thing again. So InDesign Exercise, this time I'm going to call it Spreads. There's the Adobe Print. This time, see how it's set to pages? I want it to be spreads. This makes it easy for the viewer to see it as a book layout. So you can see here are the pages side by side, side by side, side by side. So if you've made a booklet layout, please make sure that you are sending me spreads similar to what my students did for their final project. Let me go here. Maybe it was here. So this one is single pages. Makes it hard to see the book, and it looks a little bit awkward because the page numbers are bouncing side to side. So that doesn't really make sense. But if you do it correctly, there's our page numbers on each side. You can see it correctly. It's just a little bit of advice for your booklet on the final. All right, so that's it for today. Please go ahead and go through this. I'm going to be posting another lecture next week. If you have any questions, I will be online. You guys can get a hold of me on WebEx or send me a message on Canvas. I'm really flexible to meet with you at whatever time is convenient for you. We are all on this kind of crazy unscheduled schedule, whatever that may be. So again, I miss you all. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing what you guys can do with InDesign. Thanks again.